And we are live. Look at that. It is time for the pre-show for today's 2/20/11/02 Core 2 A Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Settle in. We got about 10 minutes until the actual stream gets started. This is the pre-show where I make sure everything is where it's supposed to be, which is not always the case. But today, looking pretty good. We're looking all right. Our cash numbers are good at 3%. The data rates are good. Internet's working the way it should be. Audio seems to be working in my ear. Everything appears to be operating as expected. Folks are here. I can see the chat is there. Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Did I ever replace this mouse? I did not. Same mouse. I've not replaced it yet. It's still, see the wire? See that wire? That's the only thing. But it just works so well that I haven't swapped it out yet. They have the new Bluetooth version, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. There's really no excuse other than I haven't done it. That's it. Not really an excuse. It's just there. But the mouse is just, it's a behemoth. It's a big mouse. You can kind of tell as I'm holding it here. I mean, that's my hand next to the mouse. It's a big mouse. It's a monster. It's by design. So it's literally called a hand shoe mouse. I think it's made outside the US. It's made in the Netherlands, or it's designed in the Netherlands. It's made actually in China, where everything is made, but it's designed out of the Netherlands. And it is such a good mouse because your whole hand just sits on the mouse. So your hand never touches anything on the desk. It is a awful gaming mouse. Because if you need to do something fast, you have to move way over here. It's a big thing to have to move around. But it is the most comfortable mouse I've ever used. It is so comfortable. So that's why I have it. And they have a new one that's a Bluetooth that is ambidextrous, which means it has two ambis on it. That's what that means. It means I can use it as a right-handed mouse or left-handed mouse. And it just flips over so you can do it on either side, which is kind of nice. Right now, you have to buy a small, medium, or large, and they have information on their website on how to measure your hand to get the right-sized mouse. This is the large, I am pretty sure. This is the large. And the one that they have produced is one that will flip back and forth. I think they also have different sizes, but you have to currently with this wired version, you have to either purchase a left-handed version or a right-handed version, and then you have to purchase the size you want. So the new one, I think, is a little more straightforward. You still have to pick the right size, but you can switch it between left and right, which is kind of nice. Well, we're doing A Plus today, A Plus Core 2. We did our Core 1 a couple days ago, which was really good. And now we've got Core 2, all new questions today. This will be good. And of course, you can always, I should probably put the link up. You can always put a link or a question in for the after show. After we are done with this first hour, we do our after show where I take your questions, whatever question you have about whatever you'd like to ask. I don't know that I will answer anything that you would like to ask, but I can certainly look at the questions you submit. You can do that all from one place. You ask the questions. You can answer the questions. Everything is in one place at professormesser.com/QA. That's where it is. And I think everything is up to date with that as well. I think all the numbers are good. Let's check calendars real quick. Laptop's not up. Get the laptop up. Boom, there it is. Screensaver kicked in. We're just going to get that going. Everything else is looking good. Recordings are indeed going, so we're good there. 2 recordings here locally. And of course, the stream that goes out to YouTube is also recording. So really, we have 3 recordings that are going. And that's it. That's where we are. The internet is up right now. I'm going to knock on something. The internet is up. So we're good there. We have about 5 minutes and 20 seconds until we get things started at the top of the hour. And right now, we're just kind of hanging out. Hope everybody's doing well. Is the Network Plus done? Well, my Network Plus course, the N10009, is indeed all finished. It's out on the YouTubes. If you are not subscribed, you'll find it out there, professormesser.com/YouTube. Everything there is all finished. 5-minute warning. There it is. So there's plenty to see on the Network Plus side. And we may add some other things later on, but all the videos are done. They're all done and put away. That was a number of weeks ago, I think. I'm not exactly sure when we finished it up, but it's been done for a while. We actually shot that one. Almost the entire thing was shot before I started editing, which is very unusual. Normally I will shoot. I'll do a shooting session where I will get 5 to 10 videos shot, and then I will go through the process of editing those videos. So then I'll post them, and you'll see there's 5 to 10 new videos posted. Then I'll go repeat the process. So I do them in chunks. Well, this time I did them all as one big shooting all the way through. So we shot every video, almost every video, before we started editing. And I got there near the end and I started editing a little bit, but I wanted to get everything in the can for a number of different reasons. I wanted to get everything done and finished, and we did. We got through all of those, and then I went back. Another reason I like to do it in chunks is if you run into some type of production problem that you didn't recognize when you were shooting, you don't have to go all the way back and do that all over again. So the worst you would lose is 1 days of production, which has happened before. We've sat down, I've shot it. It sounded good in my ear. It looked good on the screen. It looked good on the switcher. Everything looked fine here. And then I put it into the post and it has dropped frames on the recording. Maybe there was an SSD issue. Maybe there was a buzzing in the audio I didn't recognize that I could not hear it in my chain. It's actually in the production chain. So there's different things that can happen. So I hate shooting tens of videos without ever editing. But what I did is, as I shot every day, I would go back and do a QA, look at the final version of what we shot, the raw video. Did everything look okay? Does it sound okay? I'll put it into the editor. Really, it's in the editors where I see it. I visually can see problems with the audio in the editor much better than hearing it, because it's so visual. You really get to see everything in the audio wave. So that part works great. So that's what I would do. I would shoot a little bit. I'd shoot for a day. Then I'd put it in the editor or grab one, stick it in the editor. Yep, that looked okay. We can keep going. I just don't like having all that raw video sitting around. I like to have it edited, posted online. Because once I get everything online, I rarely go back to the original video. Why would I need to? Unless something was very wrong. Maybe I do need to change part of the audio. Maybe something in the video needs to be clarified, or, mistakes can happen during the production process. So I like to go back and fix those in post. And most of the time I can fix them with a voiceover. I can fix them with changing the graphics on the screen, and I can put that back into the editor and then re-render and repost. That's not a big deal. I just don't like having all of that sitting around, because then I have to make sure I have all the backups. Are the backups taken care of? If we're in hurricane season, if hurricanes come through Florida, do I have everything set up to protect those? I just don't like being in that position. So once it's shot, once it's edited, and once it is posted to YouTube, it's kind of done. We're really finished with that piece. So that part's great. So that was a lot of talking about the process for Network Plus. Yes, the answer to your question is yes, they're done. Am I using OBS? I am not. I have in the past. I am not using it now. OBS it is finicky. It is a little bit persnickety at times, and updates can cause lots of problems, especially updates to video drivers and updates to OBS itself. So I threw it out. No more throwing it out. This is this is what I use for streaming now. This is the console that I use for streaming, the thing that says on air here to the left. And it's from Blackmagic Designs. It is whatever their live stream product is, their 4K live stream product, even though I'm technically not streaming in 4K right now. Oh, we're almost at the top of the hour. Do I wear the same shirt in all my videos? Here's a little trivia. If there's 80 videos, I have 80 shirts. They're all identical. Not true. Yeah, it's the same shirt. Why wouldn't I? In fact, that's a good question for any of those. Look at that, top of the hour. That means we can probably get something done here Let's do a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2024 Professor Messer 220-1102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and then we'll see how well you know this content by answering these questions live and online. It's kind of fun to do it that way. We would love it if you could participate with us live as well. A great way to do that would be to head over to your browser, pop open a new browser window, and go to professormesser.com/QA. There it is, professormesser.com/QA. It will take you to a service online called Vevox. Kind of an odd name, but that's the way this works. Vevox is what we will be using for this. You don't have to do anything on your side. All you have to do is go to that URL, and there will be a question waiting for you when you get there. In fact, I have a question available that's one actually from last month. We don't usually do replays when we're doing these questions, but our first question of the day, I like to make sure you're able to get in, you're able to answer things okay. So if you go to that link at professormesser.com/QA, you will see this question that asks, which of the following would be the best way to view detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone? Would it be jailbreaking, developer mode, time machine, mission control, or iCloud? One of the things that is our standard rule for doing these live streams is that when you're answering the question, please use the link that is on your screen to answer those. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers into the chat room. Please don't put any hints into the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. We will come back to that question in just one moment. So thanks for being here. We do one of these live streams for our Core 2 every month. We actually do about 4 different live streams every month, one for Core 1, one for Core 2. We have a Network Plus live stream. We have a Security Plus live stream. We might add or remove some as we go, but right now that's the plan. If you're ever wondering when the next live stream might be, you can always check our calendar on our website. There's a link at the top, or simply go to professormesser.com/calendar. If you are watching this, then you probably know that we have an entire A+ course. Every minute of every video is available for you to watch for free online on our YouTube channel. You can find that either on our main website at professormesser.com, or follow the link to YouTube by going to professormesser.com/YouTube, where you can very easily click that subscribe button. See how I did that? We also have a daily pop quiz question for A+. You can get that from an email sign up on our main page, or go to Twitter or Instagram. I guess it's the service formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. I still call it Twitter, and you'll find it at professormesser.com/Twitter. We also have the same question with the pretty picture over on Instagram, professormesser.com/Instagram. Sometime in this first hour, I will give you instructions on how you can earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's a continuing education unit. This will only apply to people that have already passed their certification. If you're still working towards that, none of this will apply to you. But if you're working to renew your certification and you're using CEUs as the renewal process, then you'll want to listen in sometime during this first hour. Just keep listening in. I'll give you instructions when we finally get there. Today, we're going to have questions associated with the current version of the A+ exams. Those current versions are the 220-1101 and the 220-1102. Both of those are available until November or so of 2025. We have a release date of April 20th, 2022 when these were originally released, and we usually keep these around for 2 to 3 months, 3.5 years. So I'm trying to calculate in my mind, how many months is that? Let's not count months in that scenario. It's 3.5 years. And that means the exam retirement is going to be November 2025. Both of these exams have the same structure. They both are 90 minutes long. They both have a scale from 100 to 900. The difference, though, on the 1102, you need to earn a 700, which is a little bit better than the 675 you need to pass the 1101. So as we're going through this today, just keep in mind that when you take the Core 2 exam, that is the 1102 exam, that you will need to earn a 700. And once you pass both of those exams, you are A+ certified, and specifically A+ certified for 3 years. So even though there are retirement dates with the exams, once you pass the exams, retirement dates, they don't matter to you. You are already certified. The only important part to you is that 3-year certification, that 3-year expiration associated with that certification, and you can renew it at any time during that 3 years. You'll probably never take these exams again because you will simply renew it using some other type of process, which is kind of nice. The Core 2 exam itself consists of these topics: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. And all of the questions that we do today will come from those 4 categories. I also will have a replay of this available immediately afterwards on our YouTube channel. It's done automatically. Just a few minutes after I hit the stop button, it makes them available on the channel. And you can subscribe to that channel again at professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have an audio replay of this available. I publish this in a podcast format because almost everybody has a podcast listening program associated with their mobile device. You can certainly get them for your desktop system as well. You can find the links to subscribe to these podcasts at professormesser.com/podcast. Not a big surprise with that one. The A+ Network Plus and Security Plus Study Group podcasts are listed there. It's a great way to automatically have these downloaded and be available on your mobile device. So when you're driving to and from work, when you're working out, when you're somewhere where you can't really watch a video, you now have this lower bandwidth option and something that can be automatically added to your device. If you have a streaming service you like to use, we're probably on that streaming service too. So if you're on Spotify, for example, simply search for Professor Messer on Spotify. You'll find all of our podcast images. All of those links will come up on the Spotify side as well. About a day after this is over, you'll notice that the YouTube video description is updated. My marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this on the replay, hey, Lori, she is going through every bit of this live stream and putting in timestamps so you can always go back and find exactly what you're looking for and when it happened in the live stream, which, since we're doing a 2-hour live stream, that helps quite a bit when you're trying to hunt down that tiny little piece of information. So I find it very valuable. Some of you have mentioned you found it very, very valuable. And if that's something you like, make sure you give Lori a shout out in the chat. She's watching the chat as it goes by on the replay as well. So it's a good way to always find what you're looking for. And you can go back to any of our archives to find those timestamps and the information that you need. When we're not doing a live stream, we're over on our Discord. It's a great chat service, something where you can share screens and study with other people that are studying for their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other certifications. You can build up your own study room instantly on an ad hoc basis where you can control who comes in, who goes out. You control the audio and the video, and it's something that makes the process just a little bit easier when you're trying to study with others. You can find that at our Discord. Go to professormesser.com/Discord. So eventually you will need to take this A+ exam. If you're in the US or Canada, I would love for you to save a little bit of money. You can certainly pay full price over at the CompTIA website, but we have discounted vouchers at the Professor Messer website. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and you get the same voucher you would get from the CompTIA website, but for less money. Who doesn't like that? Not only that, I'll throw in a little bit extra. If you purchase from my site, you'll get something you can't get anywhere else. This is my Exam Hacks ebook. It's an ebook I wrote of all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years of taking CompTIA and other industry certification exams. I have tips in here that can help you with your studies, and I have tips in here that can help you with strategies during the exam itself to maybe get you a few extra points. Sometimes that can be the difference between a pass and a not pass. So if you'd like to get that for free, it's something you can't buy. You can't purchase it separately. It's only available with my success bundles or with purchasing a voucher. You can find those at professormesser.com vouchers. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier, which is, which of the following would be the best way to view detailed memory usage statistics on an iPhone? Would it be jailbreaking, developer mode, time machine, mission control, or iCloud? Let's find out what you chose. I'm going to close the poll, and we can see that from the folks that put in their vote, 65% of you say the answer is developer mode. We have 14% that say the answer is mission control. 17% said iCloud, so pretty good numbers for those two. And then hardly anyone said jailbreaking or time machine. Both of those came in with about a 1%, and that's not very much. So the three that we chose, by far, developer mode was kind of the winner in that big list. Mission control got a pretty nice number at 14%. iCloud got a pretty nice number as well at 17%. But if you are trying to get memory usage statistics, if you have an iPhone, one of the things you'll notice is that it's really difficult to get detailed anything. They try to hide a lot of that from you, and probably for good reason. But there are ways to get it. And one of the best ways to get this information is to enable developer mode. There is a developer mode configuration in iOS and iPadOS. You have to be able to run Xcode, which is an application you run in macOS to create and build applications. And that allows you to open up a console and see a lot of information about what's happening on those devices. There's a lot going on behind the scenes on those devices. There's also the same capability on an Android device. There's developer mode for that as well. It's an odd way to get to it. You go to settings, about, and then you tap the build number 7 times. No, that's really how it is. That's really how you get to developer mode on an Android device. So those are the things that can help you gather a little bit more information when you're trying to troubleshoot an iPhone or an iPad or some type of iOS device. It's a great way to do it. Developer mode is what we were looking for. We had a number of people that chose Mission Control. Mission Control is a desktop management system on Mac OS, so that's not what we would use. And iCloud is the cloud-based file service that Apple provides to not only back up your Mac device, but also share settings between Mac OS and other types of devices. Time Machine is used for backups. That's their fancy name for their backup program, which is another amazing backup utility. And jailbreaking is a way to describe someone who has used a different set, a non-official set of firmware on their iOS device and turned it into something that is a little bit more accessible, but definitely one that is not sanctioned by anyone, quite honestly. You have to worry when you start loading third-party firmware onto a piece of hardware that you aren't always sure exactly where that code came from. That's one of the biggest problems with jailbreaking. So in this case, the best way to view, in fact, of this list, the only way to view these detailed memory usage statistics would indeed be developer mode, and 65% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as many of you know, we have these multiple choice questions that we often do on these live streams, and you'll certainly get a lot of multiple choice questions on your exam. But if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, you may be surprised when you first start the test that you will not get multiple choice questions at the beginning. The questions you get at the very beginning of your exam are anything but multiple choice. They are often fill in the blank. Maybe they'll put you at a command prompt. They might have a question that you have to drag and drop things. There might be one where you have to do matching, or you might have to put things in a particular order. There's a lot of different ways to ask questions, and CompTIA likes to use a lot of different methods to be able to see if you really know information that is coming from their exam objectives. So at the very beginning of your exam, you will get a handful of questions that CompTIA calls performance-based questions, PBQs. Performance-based questions are those types of questions, and I have for you a performance-based question to start our first new question, as we do every month. This performance-based question is one that asks, pick the best utility. It's going to be hard to see that with my head in the way, isn't it? But I think we can work our way through it. Pick the best utility. I have for you on the screen, I have 8 different utilities that I've listed out, and I have 5 different scenarios where I want to match these up. So let's go through all of these different utilities, and then let's look at these different scenarios, and maybe you can make out the words that are right there under my head that is on the screen. So these utilities are top, df, check disk, dig, netuse, yum, sfc, and netstat. Now you'll notice there are 8 utilities, but I only have 5 different scenarios. That means there will be some left over at the end. These 5 scenarios are verify file system integrity after a power outage. That's what that says under my head there. We also have connect a public share drive to a user's workstation. Update a utility with a security patch. List the available drive space on a partition, and identify the application using the most RAM. Now, what we want to do is match these up. Tell me what those 5 different utilities would be for those 5 different scenarios. And of course, we'll have 3 left over at the end. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to be able to do that. See if you know what these happen to be. So for those of you listening on the podcast side, let me go through these again. The utilities are top, df, check disk, dig, netuse, yum, sfc, and netstat. So you've got a number of different options that you could pull from. Let's see, those different scenarios are verify file system integrity after a power outage. Which utility would you use for that? Connect a public share drive to a user's workstation. There's got to be one of those that does that. Update a utility with a security patch. List the available drive space on a partition. And lastly, identify the application using the most RAM. So you'll notice here that these different utilities, this is probably not going to give anything away. Some of these utilities you will find exclusively in Windows. Some of these utilities you will find exclusively in Linux. Some of these utilities you will find in both. So if you think you know the answers, feel free to add them to professormesser.com/QA. Lock in your answers by going to that link and filling in what you think the right answers would be. Really, I'm just looking for the top 5. You can just put in the top, those 5 commands, put them in order. You don't have to do very much there as you're putting them into this list. One of the things you will notice with this list, by the way, is that I'm not asking you, what does this utility do? I'm really asking you, in this scenario, what utility would you use? So it's almost like an extra step, if you will. This is very common on the CompTIA exam, by the way. You will not get very many questions, if any, that are completely straightforward. For example, you will probably not get a question that says the top utility, or it's asking you the DF utility, what does the DF stand for? Like, there's a good example. They'll never ask that because they don't care. They want to know, do you know how to use that utility, or in what scenarios you should be using that utility? It's always an extra step of how you would apply that technology or how you would apply that functionality in a particular operating system. So just something to think about and keep in mind as you are going through your studies, that this is not always as straightforward as you might think it is. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time studying sort of the flashcard trivia test type thing, and there are very few flashcard trivia questions on the exam, if any. They just really don't focus on that. We'll talk more about what to expect on the exam later on in this live stream, but that is just a good overview, I think, to give you an idea of some things that you might want to think about as you're going through those exam objectives. It's not always about rote memorization, and very often it really has nothing to do with rote memorization. It has to do with applying these technologies and these ideas to an existing scenario. They tend to speak that way. They tend to write that way a lot in the exam objectives. And that's really what they're getting at in the objectives, is that they want you to think a little bit further than what most people might think when they're going through these types of topics. You obviously need to know the detailed information about each of those utilities, but then you also have to take it to the next step and you have to know how to use them. So let's go through each one of these and see if we happen to know which utility we would use for each of these. Let's start with the one at the very top, which is verify file system integrity after a power outage. This is something that can be pretty important. If there's a power outage, you could have some type of corruption or some type of differentiation within the file system you happen to be using. The integrity of your file system is an important thing. And if you want to confirm the integrity of your file system, you will want to use CheckDisk, CHKDSK. That is a Windows utility. That's specifically really a Windows question. The real key to this one is file system integrity. If you want to check the file system, then you want to use CheckDisk. That's what CheckDisk primarily does. CheckDisk also has some physical checking of storage drives that it can do. But the big push, the big intention of CheckDisk is to verify the file system integrity. Now, a lot of the times, people will confuse CheckDisk with SFC, which was also in this list. So this is a really good example where you have to know what the differentiation is between those two. A file system, you can think of your file system and the table within the file system as a table of contents. When you open a book and you need to know where chapter 8 is, you can look in the table of contents and it tells you that chapter 8 is on page 300. And then you can go to page 300 and see that's where chapter 8 starts. But what if you went to the index and it said, well, we don't know where chapter 8 is, or it said chapter 8 is on page 5. And you go to page 5 and chapter 8 is not on page 5. Chapter 8 is on page 300. This can sometimes happen with the index that's inside of your operating system, of your file system. And so for that file system, one way to refresh that index, one way to effectively check and correct problems with that index is to run CheckDisk. It's a very common way to do it. SFC is called System File Checker, and SFC is not one of the answers that is in the list that we have here, but it was one of the options that you could choose. SFC checks files in your operating system to see if the files themselves have been modified. So this is if you go to chapter 8 and chapter 8 has a bunch of crayon marks on it, well, then we have to fix the actual chapter 8 text. Has nothing to do with your table of contents. It has to do with the information that's actually contained within that file itself. So if you're looking for differentiation, that is a really good one. That is there. Next on our list is connect a public share drive to a user's workstation. This is another Windows command to be able to do this, and it's the net use command. There's a much longer syntax for net use. You would net use and then the drive letter that you would like to associate with this share and then the name of the share itself. And there's a bunch of syntax there, and we do have documentation on our video. We demonstrate the process of doing that. But net use is the command. It's actually the net command with the use option. There are other options within the net command, but this one is the one that allows you to connect a share to a drive letter on a person's workstation. Net use, very useful utility if you ever need to share a drive letter. Next on our list is update a utility with a security patch. Well, anytime you're updating a utility in Windows, you would go to Windows Update. If you're in Linux, though, there's a number of different ways to run some updates. And one of the ways that from the list that we had available, the option that we would hope you would choose would be Yum. Yes, it's delicious, this utility. Yum is the utility that allows you to install new applications or update applications using a very easy command line front end. And something that can run automatically. It's something you can run every day. It's a great way to update. And if you're looking to update security patches, you have to you simply go to your Linux machine and tell Yum to update or upgrade, and it can do those. So you've got those functions within the Yum utility. There are other utilities that can do this. apt is another good utility for this. And there are a number, like most things in Linux, there are many, many ways to accomplish a single task. And that is just two of very many ways to do that. Next on this list is list the available drive space on a partition. Well, in Windows, we know how to do that with maybe the dir command. There's other functions within Windows that can do that as well. But in this particular case, we were looking for a Linux command. The only command that was in this list that would provide that functionality is the disk-free command in Linux. df is what that stands for. df is a great utility for being able to view how much space is available in a particular file system. And that's this partition. If you're thinking that you're running out of drive space, how much drive space do I have available? Do I have enough room to install a new application? Do I need to delete some of my older log files? The df command will tell you all of that right away. And lastly, identify the application using the most RAM. We want to find the application that is using up all of the memory in our system. And again, this is a Linux command. This one happens to be top. T-O-P. Top, as the name implies, tells you the top users of resources on your system. CPU, memory, network usage, I/O, a lot of different utilities, a lot of different functionality and metrics within the top command. But that is a good one to use. The top command, very useful and something that can give you feedback immediately on how well your system might be running. Well, that means there were three options we did not choose. We did not choose dig, we did not choose SFC, and we did not choose netstat. Well, we've already talked about SFC, so we know why we didn't choose that one. Dig is a command that is able to query a name server, a DNS server. So if you are wondering what the IP address of a name might be, or you're wondering what the name is associated with an IP address, the dig utility allows you to do that. If you're in the Windows world, NSLOOKUP provides a similar functionality. There are dig executables you can find for Windows if you know where to look, but in Windows currently, the built-in utility that you'll probably be using is NSLOOKUP. If you're on a Linux environment, then you're able to use NSLOOKUP, or you're able to use dig to be able to do that. And then we've got the netstat command. Netstat is great for showing us all of the traffic that is inbound or outbound from our system, all of the different traffic flows. Netstat can also show other information, such as details with your IP address configurations, routing information, and other things. Netstat is one of these utilities that does a million different functions. And you really have to look at the man pages for netstat to really get a feel for all of the different options that are available to figure out what might be there. So this is a really good example of how questions might be asked on an actual exam, because we not only need to know what that utility does, we need to know when to use that utility. So in our answers here, verifying a file system integrity after a power outage was check disk. Connecting a public share drive to a user's workstation is netuse. Update a utility with the security patch, we would use yum. List the available drive space on a partition is df, and identify the application using the most RAM is top. Now, if you don't recognize some of those utilities, or you didn't get some of those utilities right, make sure you refer back to your exam objectives. There are, of course, many, many utilities you need to know. This is just a small number of them. Make sure you know all of them that are listed there, and that you can go through this same process where you're looking at the utility name and you would know when you would need to take advantage of that utility on your system and be able to use it. That is our performance-based question of the month. There you go. We did it, everybody. That is hopefully something that gives you a little bit of a feel for the style of questions you might get on the exam, but that can certainly give you some perspective of things to worry and think about as you are going through your studies. Let's now shift gears back to multiple choice questions. And of course, I have one for you. On this list is this multiple choice question that asks, each user on a network receives an informational message on the company's login page. Which of the following would describe this message? Would it be, is that a EULA, splash screen, vulnerability scan, AUP, or incident report? Each user on a network receives an informational message on the company's login page. Which of the following would describe this message? Is that EULA, splash screen, vulnerability scan, AUP, or incident report? If you think you know the answer, you want to go to the link that's on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to answer your question. You've probably seen these as well. When you've logged into a company's login page, you probably have a little message there, an informational message. So what is that informational message? What do we call that? What is that thing? I may have said enough for this one. I've given you enough hints to work through that one and figure out the details. So hopefully I can give you some perspective with this on things that you might want to use. See if you happen to know this. A lot of people locking in their answers now. If you think you know the answer, make sure you lock your answer in by visiting the message on your screen. Go to that URL, professormesser.com/QA, and be able to answer this particular question. This should be a good one to kind of step through. There's, of course, all 5 of these are listed in your exam objectives. So again, if you notice an answer that you're not quite sure about, you're not certain what that is, you're not familiar with that particular topic, make sure you have a look into your study materials, into the video course, that you're able to find those and understand more about it, because the question you get on your exam might be related to that particular topic. Let's see. A lot of people have answered this one. So let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, each user on a network receives an informational message on the company's login page. Which of the following would describe this message? Would it be EULA, splash screen, vulnerability scan, AUP, or incident report? Let's see what you chose. We'll close our poll and we can see that the answers, 51% of you say the answer is splash screen. 27% of you say the answer is AUP. 18% say the answer is EULA. And then 3% say incident report and 1% say vulnerability scan. So nobody thinks really that it's incident report. Not very many people think it's vulnerability scan. Really, 51% is a pretty strong one with splash screen, but still over a quarter of you say the answer is AUP, whatever that is. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And EULA came in again at 18%. Now, if you're someone who is kind of working through the details of logging into a system and you notice it puts a message up on the screen when you're logging in, we refer to this as a splash screen. This could be something that's informational, that's simply telling you, attention, the system will be going down for maintenance on Sunday between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., just as an informational thing. Or it may be kind of an ongoing security piece of information that says you are logging into a secure system. If you proceed through this login, we are assuming that you are authorized to be on the system. If you are not authorized, we're going to tell you right here on the splash screen that you need to go away right now. And the splash screen, this is a good example of a splash screen. When you log into the Orange County, Florida GIS system, it pops up this disclaimer. It says, if you have any web accessibility issues with this site, please email this person during normal Orange County government business hours. The data is provided as is. If something happens to your system, it's not our fault. Nothing in here could be correct. This is on you. Now, it's the normal disclaimers, and you have to agree to this splash screen before you can continue with this particular application. So that splash screen could have said anything, of course, and occasionally they may update this to tell you this system will be going down for maintenance during this time frame. It's an informational screen to give you details about this system before you log in. It is not a contract. It's not a requirement. There's nothing here that is forcing you to choose one thing or another. All it's really telling you is that this is information you need to know before you log into the system. That is what a splash screen is. And 51% of you chose that option, and you got that one absolutely right for that. 27% of you said the answer was an AUP. This is an acceptable use policy. An AUP is a formal policy that most of the time you have to sign prior to gaining access to any systems or technologies for your company. Usually this is part of a policy book that has a lot of different policies in it, but an acceptable use policy is usually very detailed, and it's not something you would give somebody in a short little blurb before they log in. And AUP is something that is a formal set of policies you must sign off on before you're even given access. Before you even get your login, you have to sign the AUP and agree to everything that's in there. We don't put AUPs on the login page. In fact, it would be enormous if you tried to do that. Another thing that would be enormous to have on a login page is a EULA, an end-user license agreement. You're probably most familiar with the EULA when you're installing new software. Not logging in, you're installing software for the first time, and it brings up this page that you have to kind of scroll all the way through. Of course, you're reading every paragraph that's in the end-user license agreement, but most people will simply scroll all the way to the bottom and click yes, I agree, without reading anything that's in there. When you do that, you are indeed agreeing to this contract when you are installing the software. You are agreeing to use the software in a particular way. That is the end-user license agreement. The screen that pops up when you're logging in is not an end-user license agreement. It is simply a notification. In fact, there may be nothing in that screen that pops up that has anything to do with how the software is licensed. In fact, the disclaimer we saw, this really had nothing to do with licensing or how it's used. In fact, it was more of a disclaimer, like there's some data in here. We really think this data is right, but it may not be right. So you shouldn't rely on this to be able to take it as something that's super important. You don't use this information. For example, in a GIS, you wouldn't use this information in a GIS to take to court to describe where a particular border of a lot might be. You need a very specific survey to do that. You wouldn't find it on a login page or an application that you would get through there. So an end-user license agreement is usually found when you first install software and then you never see it again. Wouldn't it be awful if we had to scroll all the way down and agree to it every time we use the software? Thankfully, we don't. So in this case, a EULA would not be the thing that we would see when we have this login page. Indeed, it is a splash screen. An incident report would be a message would be a document that we create after some type of security incident. That's not the case. We're just logging in. There's been no security incidents, so that's not the information we're looking for. And then a vulnerability scan is a formal scan. It's a security scan that we're doing against a system to try to identify any issues with accessibility or any issues with security on that system. Vulnerability scans are not provided and not done when you're logging in, and certainly not provided on a login screen. The answer here, the one that is the correct answer and the one that does apply, is indeed a splash screen, and 51% of you got that one absolutely right. Let's do some more. We have more questions, and of course, next on our list is this one, and it asks, a technician is working with the ext4 file system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Is this Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, Mac OS SSD, or Windows 11 Pro? A technician is working with the ext4 file system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, Mac OS SSD, or Windows 11 Pro? It's got to be one of those, right? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen to lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in that particular answer. Let's see if you know what this one is. We'll give you a moment to lock that in. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will instead go to that list at professormesser.com/QA and lock in what you think the answer might be. This is a good one to know about. And we've already sort of talked to this topic a little bit already, not specifically, but we'll say in a moment how we got to this point. This is certainly a topic we need to know about. And each one of these options that is listed is also something we need to know about. So we'll step through each one of those, see how well you know this topic. The question again asks, a technician is working with the ext4 file system. Which of the following would best describe this system? Is this Android phone, flash drive, Windows Server, Mac OS SSD, or Windows 11 Pro? We'll stop the poll, and we're a little bit torn over this one. We have Android phone coming in at number one with 32% of the vote. Flash drive got 29% of the vote. Windows Server 13%. Mac OS SSD 15%. and then Windows 11 Pro at 8%. Almost everything double digits, and even Windows 11 Pro almost got up to the double digits mark. But the question asked, which of the following would best describe this system? So this is another really good example of the style of question you could potentially get on your exam, where there could technically be more than one answer that could be correct, but only one of them would be the best description of what we're looking for. And this is a really good example of where you could kind of squeeze this into a couple of different scenarios. Let's talk about this in a moment. What we're talking about here specifically is the ext4 file system. I have a list of file systems from our video in section 1.8 of the 2011-02, and this video is aptly named File Systems. ext3 is a file system that you would commonly find in Linux. There's an updated version of ext3 called ext4. This is the fourth extended file system. That's what the ext is for. It's the extended 4. This is commonly also seen commonly in Linux, but also seen in the Android operating system. So if you're running Android, you probably are running ext4 on that particular system or something very similar to that on that system. Of the options that we had for ext4, Android phone right at the top with 32% is what most people chose for this answer. And based on everything else that was here, that really would best describe this system. Linux isn't listed there. There's not much else here that really runs ext4 normally. Android phones certainly would be the one that would best almost 100% of the time describe that particular file system. So that would be our number one choice as an answer for this particular question. Now, what about these other answers that are here though? Wouldn't ext4 be one of these? Couldn't we use it in some of these other options? Actually, yes, you could. This is one where you can give yourself a little bit of quarter of a credit, maybe. Obviously did not answer the actual question, but a flash drive, for example, a flash drive could have many different kinds of file systems running on it. Normally, we think about flash drives, especially in the Windows world, as running exFAT, EXFAT. That is the file system normally associated, and certainly it was built for flash drives. But you could run NTFS on a flash drive. You could format a flash drive with ext3. You could format a flash drive with ext4 and store files on that flash drive. Maybe on a Linux system, you can very easily do that. It's not an uncommon thing to have happen. So technically, a flash drive could be formatted with ext4, but that wasn't the question. The question was, which would best describe this system? And in this particular case, a flash drive, although it could be formatted with ext4, it also could be formatted with NTFS. It also could be formatted with FAT. It also could be formatted with FAT32. It also could be formatted with ext3. It also could be formatted with exFAT and many other file formats as well, file system formats as well. So although flash drive could be an answer, it's not the one that fits best for the description of an ext4 file system. We also have Windows Server. Windows Server would almost never have ext4 as a file system, although there are ways to format a system, format a partition with the ext4 file system, and there are ways for Windows Server to access that file system, but you have to go through a number of hops to finally get to that point. So this would not best describe the answer we were looking for. Same thing for Mac OS, whether it's an SSD or a spinning drive. Mac OS has its own set of file systems. There are a number of different, really two major ones that you would commonly run into for Mac file systems, but none of them are ext4, so we can kind of throw that out. And Windows 11 Pro, similar scenario. There are other file systems you would commonly find with Windows 11 Pro. And they're commonly, when you see that file system, you think, yep, that's a Windows system. I'll bet that's a Windows partition. But none of those end up being ext4 either. In this case, the one we were looking for, the one that almost always is an ext4 or similar file system, is indeed Android phone. And 32% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as you've already seen today, There is a lot of topics on the Core 1 exam and a lot of topics on the Core 2 exam, and they're all over the place. There's security, there's hardware, there's operating system, there's file systems, there's installing, there's command lines, there's Mac OS, there's Linux, there's so much. There's a lot in there. And one of the things that I always encourage you to do would be to go to the exam objectives, read through those exam objectives, and watch all of the videos associated with those objectives. But if you were to do that, you would see that would be 137 videos and over 19 hours of content. And although I would love it if you went through every single one of them, not everyone has that kind of time. And then once you've gone through it, how do you remember everything that was in that video? It'd be nice to have a summary of everything that was there. Fortunately, I've already built a summary for you through my course notes. These are my 220.1102 course notes. This is the PDF or the digital edition of the course notes. All of the text from the videos is in here. All the command lines, they're documented here. All of the information about Mac OS, it's in here. All the details about Linux that you need to know, they're in here. All the charts, they're in here as well. All the graphics, the important stuff is in these notes. Not only do I have the digital edition, there's also a physical edition book. It's obviously identical in content to the digital edition, but it's something that can provide you with a physical printed version. Some people like to have that printed book version of it, and we make one of those available. If you get the printed version, we will, of course, print and send this to you. So while you're waiting, you also get a copy of the digital edition for free. You can download it immediately after purchase. So while you're waiting on this to arrive in the mail, you can already download and start using this important information for your studies. You can find out more on our website. Go to professormesser.com/1102notes or use the links at the top of the page to find the course notes. And you can even get the 1101 and the 1102 course notes together, and you pay a little bit less. There's a little bit of a discount if you start buying them together. This is also bundled with there's options to bundle this with my practice exams books. We'll talk more about the practice exams in a bit as well, but it's another great way to support what we do here, and hopefully a great way to support you as you're studying for your exams. Find out more at professormesser.com/1102notes. Let's do another question. Next on our list is this question that asks, a user has encrypted a group of files on a Windows share. Which of the following is providing this security feature? Is this BitLocker, User Account Control, EFS, NTFS Permissions, or SSO? A user has encrypted a group of files on a Windows share. Which of the following is providing this security feature? Is it BitLocker, User Account Control, EFS, NTFS Permissions, or SSO? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what you think the answer happens to be. We'll have to see what these are. All of these, by the way, again, are from the exam objectives. All of them are real things. I didn't just put a bunch of letters together, throw it on the screen, although I have my moments. But that is a very good place to go if you are trying to look. You're going through the list and you think, I think I know what that is. I'm not sure I know what that is. Make a note of it because you need to go back and study that thing. I try to make all of the answers, all of the questions and all of the answers really come directly from the exam objectives. So make sure you're familiar with what those are. Hopefully you're familiar with this feature, one that is available for someone who is encrypting a group of files on a Windows share. That's kind of what we're talking about. Have to see if we know what this one is. Let's see what you answered for this one. The question again asks, a user has encrypted a group of files on a Windows share. Which of the following is providing this security feature? Is it BitLocker, User Account Control, EFS, NTFS Permissions, or SSO? 52% of you say the answer is EFS. 28% of you say the answer is BitLocker. And then 11% of you say the answer is NTFS Permissions. 4% of you, User Account Control, and 2% say SSO. So only single digits for those last two options. Well, if you are someone who is encrypting information on a Windows share, but you're not encrypting everything, you're just encrypting a group of files on that Windows share, then you are using a functionality known as the encrypting file system, or EFS. That is gives you the ability to pick and choose individual objects in the file system to encrypt. So you can encrypt a particular folder, you can encrypt a particular file, you can encrypt a group of folders or a group of files. You can make them in different areas of the drive, but you can pick and choose. And you're not encrypting the entire drive. You're not encrypting the entire share. You're just encrypting certain aspects, certain parts of that share. So you might pick a folder and encrypt things at the folder level. It does require NTFS. This is a Windows feature and it's built into the NTFS file system. So you have to have NTFS running as the file system on this computer to be able to even see this functionality and see that option available. And it is also different depending on what version of Windows you're running. It's not available in the home system. I'm not sure why you'd need it in the home system anyway, but it's all built in and integrated and seamless to the Windows operating system. If you're logged in, then you can view the file. That's how easy it is. If you're not logged in, it's encrypted to you. It's kind of how it works. Same way with BitLocker. It's very similar. If you log in, BitLocker allows you access. You can decrypt and see everything in the file system. If you are not logged in, then you're not able to see it. So that's the example of how you're able to break through all of these different options or understand the different options for encryption. In this case, since we're talking about a group of files or a group of folders and not the entire file system, then we really are talking about EFS. And that was the answer that most of you chose. 52% of you chose EFS. In this particular case, that is the answer we were looking for, and you got that one absolutely right. Now, BitLocker got a lot of votes. 28% of you chose BitLocker over a quarter of you. And BitLocker is a great option for full disk encryption, FDE. And full disk encryption is one that encrypts everything on a drive or folder or volume. It is not a pick and choose. You don't just get to pick a group of files. You don't just get to pick a little bit of the file system. BitLocker encrypts everything by default. That's the goal of BitLocker. So in this particular question where we're saying we're encrypting a group of files, which also implies that there are other files that are not encrypted, then in this particular case, BitLocker would not apply because BitLocker would be everything that is on a particular system. We also have NTFS permissions. The NTFS permissions are things like, can I write to a file? Can I read a particular folder? Can I modify information within a file? Those are important considerations. Those permissions are important on a file system, but they have nothing to do with encryption. They have to do with, can I access or modify a type of data? So in this case, NTFS permissions would not be the answer that we were looking for. User account control is built into Windows to prevent users from doing things accidentally in the file system that could potentially open them up for a security concern. So if someone is making a change to a device driver, they're updating a device driver, they're installing a new device driver, a message will pop up on the screen that blocks everything out and says, you're doing something right now that needs administrator access. You need to authenticate with this administrator access, and then we will allow you to do this. Otherwise, click cancel, and whatever's asking you to do this thing will be stopped in its tracks. It's yet another way we can help prevent the spread of malware by using user account control and prevent some type of security issue by taking advantage of UAC and those messages that pop up. But UAC, or user account control, does not encrypt files. Has nothing to do with the file encryption process. So that would not be something we would choose in this case. And SSO refers to a single sign-on, which is a description of logging into a system once and then being able to access all of the resources necessary without having to authenticate every single time you touch one of those new resources. Single sign-on is a feature built into Windows using the Kerberos protocol. But in this case, we aren't talking about Kerberos, and we're not talking about logins, and we're not talking about authentication. We're talking about encrypting a group of files. And in this case, the best answer is EFS. That's the one we were looking for. If you chose EFS, you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here to watch this 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that email is you have to follow these instructions. If you don't follow these instructions, you don't get the email. So what you would do is go to the top or the bottom of the ProfessorMesser.com website. At the top or bottom, you will see a link that says Contact Us. That Contact Us link will pop open a form. In that form, put your name, your email address. On the subject line, please put September 2024 Core 2. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, EFS, NTFS, SSO. Those three terms are the super secret code words of the month. Again, what you would do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put September 2024 Core 2 or something close to that so that I know where this came from. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month. What did I choose? Did I say EFS, NTFS, SSO? Those three things. Hopefully I did them in the same order. If I didn't, that's okay. Do them in whatever order I said earlier. Should probably write some of this down. If it was only recorded in some way that would be more permanent that I could reference later, maybe that's what we'll work on. It's really the short-term part I should probably work on a little more. That is the process you would go through. It takes me about a week to put together those emails and get them back to you. Sometimes I can get them to you a little faster, sometimes a little slower. So we'll have to see how things go there. But this is one that I think will allow you to earn a 1 hour category, a webinar category CEU. So if you are collecting CEUs for your renewal, this can help you. If you're not collecting CEUs for your renewal, this really doesn't do anything for you other than you get an email from me. And who doesn't want that? Maybe most of you, but you'll get it anyway. If you send one to me, I will send one back to you. It's a great way to do it. I think we have some time for a couple more questions. So let's squeeze a couple more in. Next on our list is this Windows question, and it asks, a system administrator is troubleshooting a Windows 11 issue related to a crashing service. Which of the following would be the best way to view the status of all services? Would you use system information, Windows update history, system file checker, internet options, or task manager? A system administrator is troubleshooting a Windows 11 issue relating to a crashing service. Which of the following would be the best way to view the status of all services? Would it be system information, Windows update history, system file checker, internet options, task manager? If you think you know the answer, lock in your answer by going to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and telling me what you think the answer might be. A lot of people locking in their questions quickly on this one. Hopefully it's one you're very familiar with. Maybe you've even run into this. Maybe you've worked through these problems before. Maybe you've tried to view all services on your Windows 11 system, and you need to know which one you would use to be able to make that happen. See if you know. If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. This question again asks, a system administrator is troubleshooting a Windows 11 issue relating to a crashing service. Which of the following would be the best way to view the status of all services? Would it be system information, Windows update history, system file checker, internet options, or task manager? Let's close our poll. 82% of you say the answer is task manager. That's a pretty strong number. Everything else single digits. System information, 7%. System file checker, 7%. Windows update history, 1%. Internet options, 0%. Another goose egg. I can't believe I had two of those in one of these. So the real question when you're talking about services, being able to see the services that are running, being able to restart services, being able to troubleshoot services, in Windows 11, you can do all of this from Task Manager. It's already in there. You don't have to go to a separate utility. You don't have to hunt around inside of Control Panel to find what you're looking for. You don't have to go to a single services function. You can simply go to the Task Manager that is already there, and you're probably already looking at it in your task manager because there's so many other things that you can find in the task manager. So go to the services tab. It's literally a tab that says services inside of task manager that lists out all the services running behind the scenes. All your background processes are right there, and you can manage it from here as well. You can right mouse click on this and see everything. So you can see some of these are running, some of these are stopped. You get a list of everything in Task Manager. You can view all of it, not just the things that are running, not just the things that are stopped. It's the same view as if you went to the standalone services utility. Gives you exactly the same view, except it's in Task Manager, which makes it so convenient, especially when you're doing troubleshooting. Go to one place. I can look at apps. I can look at services. I can look at my network. I can look at all of the things that are already in Task Manager. Now we've just added services to the mix. And from here, I can manage it. In fact, on this one, you can even see that I have the option to stop, to restart, to open the service, to be able to view more details about the service. It's all listed there. And you can see that all the services are, in fact, they're all listed there. You can see them. You can see the process IDs for each of them, the description of them. Are they running or not? There's a lot of details in there, and it's all in Task Manager. But you knew that, didn't you? Because 82% of you chose Task Manager as the option. That is the correct answer. We don't show service information within system information. We do not show service information. We already know System File Checker has nothing to do with services because we've been talking about System File Checker, or the SFC utility, already today. So we know that's a utility that is able to look for the information in Chapter 8 that somebody took a crayon to. This will correct Chapter 8. It will fix the files that perhaps malware or some other utility has taken a crayon to. We also have Windows Update History, which is great for looking at Windows updates, but tells you nothing about services running on your system. And I'm not sure I even have to explain Internet Options because nobody chose Internet Options. That certainly does not tell you anything about services. The answer here, it's almost a gimme, wasn't it? 82% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is the right answer. It would indeed be your Task Manager that provides you with that functionality, which is kind of nice. Now, I know we're at the top of the hour, but I think we can fit in one more question, can't we? Of course we can. This question, though, is not going to be in the same format. The same rules will apply, but the same process we will go through. This time, though, this question I'm going to give you comes from my practice exams book. One of the things I found when I started looking around the internet is that there are a lot of different places you can go to find practice questions on the internet. But there are not a lot of very good questions on the internet. In fact, most of the questions I ran into were kind of bad. In fact, some of the commercial questions I have seen have been kind of bad. What I was hoping to find was a set of questions that were written with the same style and the same tone as the actual exam. And I was hoping to find questions that were specifically written for the most updated version of the exam. I don't need questions that are written for an older exam version with topics they no longer ask anymore. Yet that's a lot of what I found on the internet. So I thought, what if I wrote my own set of questions then that was specifically researched to emulate the same distribution of question types, to have the same tone and the same style and same voice as the actual exam questions. And it's one that would be specific to the topics that you could expect to find on the actual exam. And by doing that, I created my practice exams book. This is the one for the 220-1102, but I also have a book for the 220-1101. Both are very similar. They have 3 90-question exams inside. So each one of those has 85 performance-based questions and 85 multiple choice-based questions and 5 performance-based questions in each exam. So for one book, there are 15 performance-based questions in each one of these books, just so you're clear on that. Now that I've messed up all the numbers, now you understand what I was saying. Let's do a question from this book. I have it right here in front of me. This is from my book. What page is this? Page 11 from my Core 2 book. And this question is A26. And it asks, a security technician has identified malware running in the OS kernel. Traditional anti-malware scans were not able to identify any problems on the computer. Which of the following would be the best description of this malware? Is that a rootkit, a worm, a botnet, or a crypto miner? Now, because this is a PDF, I can annotate this. So if there's certain terms I'm looking at or certain words I would like to write out, or if I have a stylus, I could actually write on the PDF itself. It's not restricted in any way to you. So you're able to make any notes that you would like on the screen itself, which is kind of nice. I also tell you that if you want just the answer A, B, C, or D, you could choose Quick Answer. It's on page 33. I'm on page 11. And the details, which is really what I want to see, is on page 62. But instead of scrolling down to page 62 and then having to scroll back up, I put hot links into the document itself. You'll notice when I mouse over, it turns into the hand there with the finger on it. So if I click the details, it will jump to page 62. So when I click that, there I am on page 62 already. It gives me the question at the top of the screen again with the answers. And of course, like most of the Q&A that you will find, I tell you what the correct answer is. In this case, the correct answer is a rootkit. And of course, for every question, I give you a detailed answer on why that is the correct answer. Now, when I do questions like this in practice exams, my problem is I never get them right. I'm going through it for the first time. And when I get a question wrong, the first thing I ask myself is, why did I get that wrong? What was the wrong answer? Why did I choose the wrong answer on that one? So what I did in my book is every wrong answer is also documented as to why it is the wrong answer. I want to finish up that learning cycle. So if we get it wrong, it's an opportunity to learn something. The only way you're going to learn it if somebody explains why that was the wrong answer. So every single question and every single answer, whether it's right or wrong, are all documented in this book. I think that's an important part of this. So you'll see that B, worm, is not the right answer, and I explain why. C, botnet, not the right answer. I explain why. D is not the right answer. I also explain why. Now, if you're reading this question and you don't even understand the question, that's obviously something where we might want to spend some time doing some additional learning. I put a link at the very bottom that gives you the video that is associated with this particular question. So you can now go back, watch the video. Now you'll understand where this question came from. You'll now understand the terms that are used in the question. Maybe you'll understand more about the technologies underneath the question that's being asked. And then you can come back to this and maybe answer the question from there. Or maybe you went through these answers, you got it wrong. You thought, maybe I need to spend some more time on this topic. Now you know exactly where to go. These are hot links. You can also use the QR code. It's a legitimate QR code. It's not one of those shifty QR codes, not one of those dodgy ones you might find somewhere else. This is from a trusted source, thankfully. And they are in the book. So if you have the printed book, you go right to the page and then just put your phone up to that QR code and watch the video on your phone while you have the book in front of you. And of course, it's a PDF, so it's got a back button. Did you know there's a back button in most of your PDFs? There is. And now I'm back to where I started, and we can go to the next question that's on this list. Those are my practice exams. So if you're somebody who is working towards the final part of your studies, you've already watched the videos, you've done some hands-on, maybe you've read a book, you want to get that last check to see, am I ready to sit for this exam? Hopefully this will give you some of the information you need. You can find out more about this on my website, use the main menus, or follow the link to go to professormesser.com/core2pe for practice exams. Everything you've seen today, all of the questions, all of the topics, all of the answers, they were already listed and made available to you in the CompTIA exam objectives. This is a free document from CompTIA that tells you everything you need to know to be able to pass this exam. This is very unusual, by the way. Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. Amazon doesn't do this. Nobody provides this level of detail, it seems, with their industry certification exams. And they list out every bullet of every topic you need to know. And of course, all of my videos, all of my course notes, all of my practice exams are all based on these bullets, every single bit of this that's in here, because CompTIA stays very, very, very close to the topics that are in these exam objectives. They very rarely, if ever, deviate from the objectives, to the point that I will tell you, if you know every bullet that's in these exam objectives, you're going to pass this exam. There's no other choice. You already know everything there is to know when you walked in the door. At the end of these objectives, by the way, is a list of acronyms. There have been a few people in the chat already today that have said, where can I find a list of all the acronyms? They already give it to you for free. in the exam objectives. This is the first thing you should download before you start your studies, and you should read through it. Everything is in here that you need to know, and it's free. You can get a copy of this on the CompTIA website. Simply go to your favorite search engine and type in CompTIA Exam Objectives, or follow the link on my site, professormesser.com/objectives, and something you can use to help with your studies as well. And as I mentioned, it's free. Can't beat that price either. We do one of these study groups for A+, Core 2 every month. We actually do 4 live streams every month. My next 2 A+ live streams are the 8th and the 10th of October. That's where they're currently planned for. These dates could change, so please check in with me. Check in with the calendar before you confirm that we are going to have one that day. We are doing our Network Plus study group for September next week, and Security Plus will be the week after that. We've, of course, already booked those days in October as well on the 16th and the 23rd. Anytime there's a change to the calendar, though, I update it immediately online. You can get an immediate update. You'll know second by second what the right calendar and event settings are at professormesser.com/calendar. It's a great place to go. I also put the same information into the events channel of our Discord. So I always update those as soon as I know that something has changed. So as soon as I know it, you will also know it. There will never be a question about when's the next live event. Well, you'll know because the calendar is always up to date with that. And hopefully it's one where you won't be surprised if something does change, because sometimes life happens. Things get chaotic. I do have to move things around sometimes. This is a great way to know when the next live event is going to be. Well, we went a little bit of overtime on that first hour, but that's okay. We got plenty of time for the after show. Stick around for that, where instead of me asking you questions, this is your opportunity to ask me questions. So we turn everything around in the after show that is coming up immediately after this. We also have, of course, our course notes and practice exams. If you'd like more information on those, we've got a whole page to give you details at professormesser.com/1102success. We have our discounted vouchers. Those come with our free exam hacks ebook. You can find those at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, a great way to find us is on social media. Simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find me on. For example, if you wanted to subscribe to my YouTube channel, just a suggestion, just an example, you go to professormesser.com/YouTube. You want to find our Instagram, professormesser.com/Instagram. Want to find us on LinkedIn, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. You get the idea. So it's a great way to find us, an easy way to find us, or you can follow the links that are at the top of our website for all of those social media sites. Well, thank you for being here in this first hour. Stick around for the after show. We got a lot more to go through. I have all the questions you've been asking, you've been accumulating, and I'll tell you other ways that you could ask even more questions as we go through this next hour. Thank you so much for joining us in our first hour, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay. Let's see if I can bring up, picture me. There I am. Hey, everybody. Let's now work our way into the after show portion of today's live stream. I need to bring this up on my screen so that I can see and show you what we want to do in the second hour. If you go to that same app, that same link that we have been using this entire time, which is professormesser.com/QA, you will now see a link on your screen. It says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. In reality, it will not appear immediately because I am looking through the questions in real time on my side as you are submitting them. And we can kind of break these down. Now, these are questions about anything. They could be about technology, about certifications, about IT, about career. It could be about other things as well. It could be about the studio. It could be about what's happening in other parts of the world. I don't know. It could be about anything. You're welcome to submit any question you'd like. I don't know that I'll answer any question you might submit. I've gotten some good ones, but I've not really answered all of them. But I will be looking through and parsing these out as we go through this list. There were a couple questions that came in this month about the way we we do this behind the scenes. As many of you are probably aware, this is what I see whenever I am working here in front of the camera. Usually this is where I am most of the time. Usually, of course, the lights aren't on. I don't have the video switcher turned on. We aren't streaming live all the time, but usually I've got a couple of screens up. Usually the laptop is down, pushed off to the side. And I usually have about 2 screens up. My iPad's usually here, and I'm usually working on some other type of content. And there's usually different things that we do when we are building out these videos. A question about this topic, about being able to understand what we do and how we set up everything in this particular room, comes from Chris. Chris asks, hey, is this room soundproof? How do you do all of that? How does this work with the sound? The audio is a big part of what we do. In fact, audio is one of the most important things in a video. People don't really think of it that way. People think of the video as being resolution and the number of colors and how you're compressing it. And of course, all of those things are indeed important. But I really feel that if the sound is bad, I'm not going to watch the video. So we spend a lot of time on audio and making sure the audio sounds good, that it's a good representation of what I am saying, that I'm not over modulating anything or changing compression settings that are over compressing and making it sound funny whenever you're listening. I want it to be as natural as possible. And I want it to be something that is easy to listen no matter where you happen to be. That is an ongoing challenge. It is a constant battle to find the right equipment, the right setup, the right cables, the right place in the room. But we've got a pretty good mix on this now. We've got a pretty good setup for all of this as it's here. The room itself, I would not say is soundproof. It is a standard room. There's really nothing in here that makes it any soundproof than anything else. One of the few things that I do is I put curtains on the windows. That's it. Now that accomplishes a couple of things. One is that it blocks the light. These are blackout curtains that I have in here, and they're not fancy curtains. They're not soundproof curtains. They're just Amazon curtains. And they are designed first to keep the light out, because the lighting that I set up in here, you can't really see it in this view, but there are lights. You can kind of see the lights on my hand there. There's lights up at the top, very simple Elgato key lights that I'm using. That's the name of the company, Elgato key lights. And they are simple LED soft lights. And those lights, I need exactly the same lighting in here, regardless of what time of day it is, regardless of whether it's sunny outside, whether it's cloudy outside. So I block out all of the windows, and that means that the lighting will always be the same all the time. The settings in my camera are locked in. They are manual. They're not automatic. There's no, you can see it's not changing anything with the focus. It's not changing anything with the color. Nothing changes. It is locked in and documented. So if that camera goes out and I get another camera, I can at least get similar settings and set it up in a similar way. That's one thing that we do. The soundproofing, that's pretty much it. The blinds or all the curtains that we have in here really help with the sound. The other thing that helps with sound is this particular microphone is a Heil PR40, Heil. This is, I've had this microphone from the very beginning. So this is a 20-year-old mic, I guess, at this point. This microphone is designed to prevent any of the noise anywhere else in the room from being heard. So really the only thing that you hear is right in the front. So if I put my hand on here, that's all you hear is what's right in the front of this microphone. If I go off to the side, you will see it drops off dramatically when I move off to the side. You have to stay, it's very unforgiving. You have to make sure that you are right on the mic, because if the mic goes up over here, it's very difficult to hear what's going on. So that's pretty good. They can be outside cutting the lawn. Someone can be banging a gong outside the door. You won't hear it. So if you are in that situation where you're you got a very busy environment, maybe you work in the city, but you want to make some videos, well, go get a microphone like this, because all you have to do is just put that mic over here and you'll see the suppression of noise. There's nothing extra I'm doing on this mic. There's no extra processing. There's very little processing that's going on for the microphone. In fact, I should be able to bring up what the processing is that I am doing. In fact, let's do this since I'm here, since we're doing this. Everything that I'm running is through this video switcher. This is the software component of the video switcher. It's the software version of this unit that is in front of me. And although you can kind of make it out, there's a set of buttons here, there's a pair of buttons here, there's some more buttons, red buttons on this side. The software version of this I also have up on the screen, which is kind of nice, so that I can manipulate, and without those controls, I can even run it all from software if I wanted to. Now, the benefit of this is that this also handles the audio. So any of the audio that I'm running through this, I control from this screen. Mostly. I can also do it from the physical controls, but a lot of what I do is from right here. So as you can see, very simple. It's one input, one output. I got an XLR connection for the microphone that's coming in. There's no additional processing that I'm doing. I'm literally plugging directly in to the back of the video switcher, and it's doing all the audio. So I know this is a little inside baseball. We're sort of going off this, but that's what the after show is for, right? The only thing I'm really doing here inside of this is there is some slight equalization that is taking place. In fact, I might even have it flat right now. I might not be doing any equalization on any of this. I think for the XLR, the only thing I've really turned on is a little bit of, you can see, yeah, the equalizer is completely flat. The only thing that I've really turned on, there we go, is a little bit of anti-essing, some de-essing, the essing noise. There's a little bit that I did turn on somewhere, but you can see it's pretty flat all the way across. I left it that way intentionally. Now you could turn it up or turn it down. I used to run much more bass voice, and it was, I'm James Messer. Thank you for joining us today on the book. But it got to be a little bit ridiculous. And then how do you, when you move from equipment to equipment to equipment, your voice would be different. That's not what I was shooting for either. Instead, you get whatever the good and the bad is with the real voice. There's nothing extra we're doing here. All we're really doing is cutting down a little bit on the S's, and that's how you get the sound that's in here. So I'm not sure that was exactly the question that was asked about this. I kind of went all the way down and around the barn there to give you the overview of how we do all of this. But I think that gives you a little bit, but no special soundproofing. I did make sure that I got a nice quality door when we built the studio so that we could keep out as much audio as possible. I made sure that behind the studio that I didn't have like air conditioner compressors or other pieces of equipment that you often will have in a house. We made sure those wouldn't be directly behind me. I made sure that where the studio was, there was nothing out to the side. So there were things we did to minimize the audio, but in reality, as I've already mentioned, once you get off mic, you can't really hear it anyway. So that's a benefit. That's a nice thing. So thank you so much for sending that question in. It's always fun to kind of talk about the inside baseball with what we do. Let me follow up that with a question from David, who you can't see because I don't put the right video switcher up. There it is. This question from David asks, are you using Apple or Windows? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. I use everything in here. I don't limit myself to any particular operating system for a number of different reasons. Let's go back to the big view and kind of break this down into what we're looking at. So my primary daily driver, if you will, for what I do is the system that's right in front of me. This is an Apple display, and it is displaying information from an Apple Studio, a Mac Studio. Apple Mac Studio is the name of that device. In fact, can't we see a picture of it? Can't we bring something up on About This Mac? We sure can. So if we were to look at this studio, there it is. That's what it looks like. It's this system. It's the original M1 Ultra version, 128 gig of memory. It has, what does it have in it? Let's see the specs of it, everybody. It has running Mac Sonoma 14.6.1. I'm running the latest stuff on an Apple Studio display, 27-inch. On the right side, which you don't see, this machine, this screen to the right side is an LG Ultrafine display. I've had it for a while. I would have rather had the Apple Studio just to stay consistent. And there are some idiosyncrasies with having third-party displays in it, but it works pretty well. And this one that says BMD HDMI display, 46-inch. There's no 46-inch. What? What's this? That is actually the, there's a separate box that takes the HDMI output from the studio, from the app, the Mac Studio, and it converts it into SDI, which is the video input that is used by the video switcher. And when you turn that on to the operating system, it simply looks like another display, and I'm simply mirroring that information, which is how you're able to see the screen in front of me on the video display that you have here. That is the way that it kind of works to be able to work through those. So hopefully that's given you at least some perspective. And that's mostly Mac. That's Mac OS that I use as the daily driver. It's obviously, the MacBook here is obviously running Mac OS. I have Windows running on other systems that I use throughout the business, and other people that are working for me are also using Windows. I also have Linux that is on, if you're on my website right now, you are on a Linux machine of some kind. My web server, my database server, my caching server, and other devices I use are Linux out on my data center. So I try to do a little bit of everything so that I keep up to date and understand what's going on in the world of Linux, keep up to date in what's happening with Mac OS, and I keep up to date and understand what's going on in the world of Windows. And I have tons of virtual machines that I run for almost all of those on my desktop here. So anytime I want to run Windows, I will run for my system. I think I can bring this up so that you could see it. We're going to remind me later to do an update in this operating system. So if I was to show you my virtual machine manager, I'm running Parallels, and Parallels, I've got a Windows 11 machine right here. So I can just start up Windows 11. I got a test server here, my web server, I can also run locally. So there's Windows 11. If I need Windows, there it is. And I can just start her up, and now I'm running Windows on this Mac OS device. So instead of running Mac OS, I'm now running Windows. See how easy that was? Up and running. And the type of Windows distribution I use, or Linux distribution I use, varies widely depending on what I'm doing. I try to do different ones on my local desktop, but I have, it's usually a Red Hat CentOS type of operating system that's running out on the internet side, just to kind of give you a feel for what we're doing there as well. And that's, so I'm not really running Apple, not really running Windows, not really running Mac OS, Linux. I'm running all of them. If there's something to run, I'm going to run it. I think that's one of the best ways to keep track of all of these. So let's keep going through the details of these different questions you have. We have a question about the exam itself. I think this is a good one to kind of talk about. This one is from Parker, who asks, "Hey, Professor, I'm studying all the acronyms from the CompTIA list. How frequently do acronyms appear on the exam? And should I focus more on the objectives?" That's a pretty good question. This is one that also comes up quite a bit, because if you were to look at the exam objectives, there's a lot of acronyms in there. We went through that before. Let's look at it in a little bit more detail. Here is the exam objectives again. I'm just going to page through this and go all the way to the final pages in the back where it lists out for you. Let's do it on a single page, shall we? The CompTIA A+ Core 2 2201102 acronym list. And they list out for you all these acronyms. In fact, there's pages and pages and pages. 3 pages of acronyms for the 1102 exam. There's different ways to approach acronyms. And I think the approach a lot of people immediately go to is kind of the default flashcard view, which is AC is alternating current. ACL is access control list. ADF is automatic document feeder, and so on. They just go through the list and they memorize those. AC, alternating current. ACL, access control list. ADF, automatic document feeder. They go through all of that. The exam will never ask you, of this, what is that? They will never give you that trivia question. You will never see a question that says, what does the acronym AC stand for? They'll never ask it. You're never going to get one. So if you've spent all of your time memorizing every single acronym and all of the words associated with those abbreviations, you've not really wasted your time, but you've not really prepared for the exam. What you really need to do is add one more piece of information to this. You need to add AC stands for alternating current, which is a type of power that is used commonly from the primary power source. In the United States, we use this. In Europe, we do that. So you take it to the next step. You always add on. What does that do for you? Where would you see alternating current? What does that look like? Does it have a graphic? What does the graphic for alternating current look like? Those are good things to know. That's what you may be asked about. You may be asked on the exam. You need to plug in a power supply to the primary power source in the United States. What type of power is that? It's not a great question, but I think it gives you the idea that you need to know that this is more than AC stands for alternating current. You need to understand what alternating current is. You need to understand what that does for you. You need to understand how to apply that particular technology. And if you're doing that, great. That's what you need to do. That's how you use this acronym list. But don't use this acronym list as a simple rote memorization of abbreviation and the words, abbreviation and the words, abbreviation and the words. That's not going to help you very much. What you will often find, though, is you will rarely need to go to this acronym list. Because what I think you're going to find is if, for example, we go back to the main part of this exam, we go to the sections in here associated with troubleshooting, for example. So section 3, and we look at the troubleshooting section for Windows problems where we're having boot problems or things aren't starting, and maybe it's associated with power. And if it's associated with power, it might be related to the alternating current. So notice how we kind of had to go through a couple of steps here, but you'll find that the things that you learn in the exam objectives apply back to the abbreviations kind of generically, kind of automatically. So you don't have to learn the objectives one by one by going to the back of the list. You'll already know these abbreviations because you had to learn them as you went through the exam objectives. And I think that's all you need to worry about. There are some of these acronyms, by the way, that I don't know that you're ever going to run into. There's a couple in here. Most of these are pretty good. Most of these are spot on. But there are a couple of acronyms in here that I'm trying to figure out, where did that come from? Where did they pull that acronym out of? Because it doesn't apply to any of the exam objectives, but it's a real acronym. We use it in the industry, but it doesn't really apply to what we're doing here. Of course, I don't see one offhand by doing this. I run it, hardware assisted virtualization, HAV. Here's a good example. Well, now I switch to another screen. Sorry. Hardware assisted virtualization, HAV. It's not really in the exam objectives. It's not really even a term we commonly run into, but it's in this list. So you will find a couple of those every once in a while that don't seem to exactly fit back with the overall scheme of things. I think if you have gone through the exam objectives, I think you would have just naturally learned all of the abbreviations you need to know. That I don't think you'll have to do anything that would be above and beyond anything that's in the exam objectives. but it certainly doesn't hurt. So just make sure you apply the context, and I think you'll be fine. Let's go through some more questions that you have that you are submitting. You can submit questions at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can send me a question. I'm looking at these as they're coming through. There's a lot of questions here, so I appreciate you putting these through this list and telling me, giving me an idea of things you would like to know about. Okay, there's a couple of questions on here, and I don't want to give too much away because somebody is giving me a question. This is from Anonymous. So I'm going to tell you the question, but I'm not going to show you this one. The question asks, I sat and passed the 1101 this week, and I got 6 questions on a particular topic, which was much more than I expected. Is there anything in the 1102 that might appear niche, but could make up a larger number of questions? This tends to happen sometimes when you sit down for an industry exam, and it seems that every question on this exam is about printers. Every question on this exam seems to be about file systems, or every question on this exam tends to be about one security vulnerability. But it's usually the cases that you just happen to randomly get a set of questions that tend to keep popping up over and over again. Now, of course, it's not going to be 100% of your exam. It's not going to be every question that you get, but you're like, another printer question, another printer question, another printer question. It seems to be happening over and over. And at the end of the exam, you think there were a lot of printer questions on that one. So this particular person is asking this, saying, I got a lot of questions on something that seemed to be a very specific topic. Let's say you got a lot of thermal printer questions on your exam. You got a bunch of thermal printer questions, and you weren't expecting all those thermal printer questions. But statistically, that section of the exam could be 25% of the exam. And statistically, the randomization process could happen to give you just happen to have a lot of thermal printer questions on your exam. It was just the nature of the random number generator at that particular time. That happens, and you can't really prepare for it. Hopefully you knew a lot about thermal printers when you went into the exam. Same thing can happen with any industry certification exam. And every time you sit down for an exam, it's a different random set of questions. Even if let's say you took the exam and you didn't do well, so you reschedule the exam and you go back to sit to take the exam. People have actually emailed me and said, I took the exam again because I failed the first time. I passed the second time, but the second time was a completely different set of questions. That's right. That's exactly correct. It's not the same exam every time. So every time you sit to take an exam, it's going to be a different set of questions. Now, randomly, maybe 1 or 2 of those was the same as a question you got on the first exam, but it is a different set in a different order with a different random selection every single time. So I don't think I can point to any specific topic and say, will one of these topics come up more than the others, because it's all random. And you could be in a position where all of the questions are very evenly distributed and no particular topic seems to be more or less distributed than any other. Or maybe you get the test that has all the thermal printer questions on it. Those things happen and you can't really prepare for it. The only thing you can do is to know everything listed in the exam objectives. Then it doesn't matter. Every question could be on thermal printers. You already know thermal printers, you'll do just fine. So I think that's the way you should approach it, is not to worry or try to reverse engineer what they are doing with the exam. Instead, just be prepared for anything. That's what you should do. And the reason I'm not mentioning the specific topic is that everyone who takes their exam has to sign or agree at the very beginning to a candidate agreement where you will not discuss details of the exam. And so anytime that anything relating to what you saw on the exam comes up, you'll notice I don't want to talk about that. I don't want you to violate the terms of your non-disclosure that you agreed to when you sat down for the exam. So that's why I'm not mentioning the specific topic, but in reality, it doesn't matter what the specific topic is, only that there was a topic, and similar idea there. Let's do some more questions. next on this list, since we're talking about exams, we'll talk about this from Chris. So speaking of performance-based questions, what should I expect to see as the performance-based questions? Well, this is probably one of the larger questions I get when we talk about exam prep. And I think part of it is just the fear of the unknown. We know what multiple choice based questions are. We know that multiple choice questions have a question, and there's an option A, an option B, an option C, and an option D. And we could just guess and still get 25% chance of getting it right. We love those multiple choice based questions, but CompTIA does not like you guessing. They don't like you getting points if you don't know the topic. They want to really know that you've studied and you understand everything that's in the exam objectives. So what they do is at the very beginning, they present a question that is presented in a way that is not multiple choice. You can't guess at it to get it right. So it might be a matching question. It might be a fill in the blank. It might be one where they put you to a command prompt and have to perform a function to run a program. Maybe you have to put things in a particular order. Maybe it's a drag and drop question, a scenario question. So it's simply a different way to ask the information that you already know from the exam objectives. Again, we go back to the exam objectives. If you know all of the topics on the exam objectives, really doesn't matter to you how they ask the question. You already know the answer. You already know the topics. You already understand the technologies. You already know how these are used. So the point that I try to tell people is don't worry so much about the style or the method that's being used to ask the question. You should instead feel comfortable that you already know the answers. Because if you've studied the exam objectives and you know every single one of those bullets, doesn't matter how they ask it. You'll know the answer. Doesn't matter if it's a matching question, you'll be able to match it. If it's a fill in the blank question, you'll be able to fill in the blank. If it's a drag and drop question, you'll know what to drag and you'll know where to drop it. So that's what I want to get across to folks. And indeed, many people tell me after they take the exam, well, I took the exam, the performance-based questions were very straightforward. Like, I know. I knew exactly what to do on the performance-based questions. That's right. They are very straightforward. You will know exactly what to do. And if you know the content, if you know the objectives, you're not going to have any problem answering those questions. So don't worry so much about what the unknown question is going to be or the format. I give you some style of these, at least in these live streams. Some of the matching questions. Last week we did one that was at the command prompt. So you get some different options, some different things to help you get a better feel for this. And I've got performance-based questions in my practice exams book as well. There's the core 1 anyway. I don't know where my core 2 book went. It's got to be around here somewhere. So I've got some in here. See if I can. So for example, there's pictures and drag and drops and other things in there that you could learn from. But at the end of it, if you know the content, doesn't matter how they ask the question. So you will not have to worry about it. I promise you. Other questions. Let's keep going through this list. This is a pretty good one. It's from Ian. Ian asks, while studying for the 1102, I heard it was useful to work through Python and Linux tutorials. Are there any such tutorials you'd recommend to best prepare oneself for working in networking or cloud after our first IT support job? So there's two questions here. Or at least two parts to this question I want to focus on. The A+ exam does not expect you to know how to do any coding at all. You don't have to know Python. You don't have to know PowerShell. You don't have to know how to write a batch file. You don't have to know how to run a shell script. You have to know what those are. You have to know when they are used. You have to know that if somebody shows up and says, hey, we need to run a PowerShell script, you should already know where you're going to be running that. And you'll probably have an idea of what that script is going to be able to do for you. Those are the things you need to worry about. So you don't need to necessarily have a deep knowledge of scripting languages. Now, it might be useful to have some hands-on on Linux, however, and it might be useful to have some hands-on on Mac OS. We demonstrate these in our videos so that you can get a feel for how you would use this at the command line if you did not have a command line available. But these days, it's pretty easy to spin up a Linux virtual machine and use Linux. In 20 minutes, you'll be up and running. 15 minutes, you'll be up and running with Linux. And being able to work at the command line on a Linux machine. So you can do some Linux. I think that's a great idea. So make sure you stick to the exam objectives when it comes to things like scripting languages, and you'll be okay. That's my disclaimer for you regarding this particular question. The real question here, are there any such tutorials you recommend to best prepare oneself for working in networking or cloud after your first IT support job? I will give you a recommendation here, and it's one that I've given before in the live streams, is that the big differentiator that I've always seen in the industry, and this is me going back a number of years, just a couple, because when I started in IT, there was no internet. Just to give you just an idea of just how old and crusty I am, we go back to those days. And even then, one of the most useful and noticeable and marketable capabilities that I was able to put into my wheelhouse was automation. Anytime that you're able to automate anything, you are saving yourself some time, you're saving your company some time, and when you're saving time, you're saving money. And in some cases, you're saving a lot of time, which means you're saving a lot of money. The more you can automate, the more valuable your skill set is going to be, not just for what you're doing today, but what you will be doing for the rest of your career. And all of these skills build on each other. So if you know how to automate with a batch file, you can easily automate with a shell script, which will lead you very easily into automating with PowerShell, which will lead you into automating very easily with Python. The same logic applies to multiples of these automation and scripting tools. And I think in the world of IT, we don't do programming in IT. I mean, I guess if you wanted to be pedantic with the term programming, a script is a program. But when I say the word programming, what I'm referring to is someone writing an application. You are building out a mobile app that is going to run on your iPhone. You're building a browser-based application that you are deploying into a larger facility. You know, these are people that are computer science people that have learned programming languages, and everything they do is about those programming languages because, quite honestly, that is a science unto itself. It's a computer science, quite literally unto itself. And that is one that you could spend your entire career trying to master. And that's why computer science and the world of application development is its own world. It's not IT. It's computer science. So if you want to separate those two out, that's the context I am putting them in for this conversation. So for us in IT, we focus on automation. We focus on scripting. We focus on doing things in a way that we don't have to manually sit there and type them out. And if you wanted to pick, I would recommend picking one or both of these as a jumping off point. And one of them would be PowerShell. That, of course, is the automation and scripting language for Windows. And the other would be Python, which is obviously a automation and scripting language for practically any operating system. Certainly multiple operating systems supported with Python. Both of those will teach you skills that you can apply towards any scripting language. And they are two very popular skill sets that employers love to look for. So if you're trying to get into networking, being able to use Python, being able to use PowerShell, very useful. If you're trying to get into operating system management, server management, PowerShell, Python. If you're trying to get into cloud-based technologies, PowerShell and Python. See where this is going? So if you can be knowledgeable enough to be able to write your own applications in PowerShell, I say applications, but scripts in PowerShell or in Python, you are now at a very top tier of IT, quite honestly. I'm speaking as someone who really got to meet and talk with thousands of different IT professionals in my career because I worked for a manufacturer of hardware and software. So whether it was Network General, McAfee, Network Associates, NetScout, Palo Alto Networks, I represented and worked as a systems engineer with all of those companies. So I got to go visit multiple companies a day and meet with multiple people within those companies. And some of these are small companies. Some of these are Fortune 100 companies, some of the biggest companies in the world. I met with security and networking professionals at these enormously large companies of names of products that you have on your desk right now that you know about that are very well-known organizations. And one of the things is that they're even in these biggest companies in the world, there is a very wide group of skill sets even within the technologists at those companies. You will very rarely walk into any company and find that every technologist there is the top tier. Very often there's a group of people they've just started out, they're learning different skill sets, and they're working their way up through learning these things. So what you'll find is people who are really familiar with PowerShell, people who are really familiar with Python, is an upper level % of people within those organizations. Because a lot of us, we're just still trying to figure it out. We're drinking from a fire hose. We're just trying to learn, how does Windows work? What are these protocols? How do I configure the switch? How do I set up this routing table without crashing the entire network? That's where we are. Once you're past that point, now we can work on the automation part. Now we can nuance this a little bit. And there's not a lot of people out there with that level of skill. So if you can get that level of skill, it positions you a little bit higher. It gives you another thing that you can talk about in an interview to say, here's why you should hire me, because I have these skill sets that you don't have to say it this way, but I'll bet not a lot of people in your organization have these skill sets. That's what you're hoping for always. That's why I always mention, if there's a niche you enjoy, go learn everything there is to know about that niche, because I guarantee there will be very few people in an organization that have your level of knowledge if you've spent that amount of time in that niche. Maybe that's firewalls. Maybe it's routing protocols. Maybe it's switch technologies. Maybe it's managing cloud-based automation. Whatever it is, find the niche that works for you, become an expert in that niche, and that's the thing that's going to open the doors for you. A lot of the times we talk very generally whenever we're talking about the A+, and Network Plus, and Security Plus. These are very general entry-level certifications. They're designed to be that way. It's intentional that we're using those as an entry level into the world of IT. But once you get here into that world of IT, where do you go? And I think finding that niche, and that niche, that thing that interests you, it may be one thing today, but a year from now, it might be in a different niche. So you're going to learn everything you can about that niche for that year. And then suddenly you've spent all that time in virtualization or cloud or whatever it happens to be. And then suddenly big data comes along. AI shows up. You're like, well, that's interesting. Let's go over here and look at AI. And we'll do some AI stuff. We'll see if we can use big data. We can see if we can really use that data to do something interesting. Or let's see how do we store all of that data? How do we automate the process of managing all that data? You get the idea. So anytime you start to find that niche, just keep going down that road. Learn everything you can about it. It'll change as times change, but you'll still have the knowledge. And I guarantee you all of these are going to start building on each other as well, which is another nice thing about IT, is that what you are learning at the very beginning of your career still will have an application at the very end of your career. I promise you. At the very beginning of my career, I was looking at protocols on a wire. I was learning about, at the time, there was Ethernet. I was learning about Token Ring. I was learning about Apple Talk. Don't hear much about Apple Talk anymore. We were running Apple Talk over Token Ring. which we call token talk, quite literally. And then other protocols as well, other topologies that aren't around anymore. We ran FIDI, we ran Token Ring, we ran older versions of Ethernet over coax, 10 base 2, 10 base 5, vampire taps, that type of thing. We don't use those anymore, but the protocols are the same. Ethernet works the same way. TCP/IP works the same way. So the skills that we learned 30 years ago, still using those skills. The batch files I created 30 years ago allow me to create batch files today. The automation that I worked on with the logic, we didn't have PowerShell 30 years ago. We didn't have Python 30 years ago, but the logic I used to create scripts back in that day of the dinosaurs allows me to build Python scripts, Perl scripts, PowerShell scripts, and other scripts today using that same logic. So whatever you're learning today, keep learning that. Whatever interests you today, go after that interest. I guarantee you that will continue to benefit you. You will continue to get dividends from that investment, because that is something that, for better or worse, that's the way IT works, is we just keep building on these technologies. And the more you know about what's happening under the surface, the better of a technologist you're going to be for designing, troubleshooting, maintaining, and all the other aspects of keeping these technologies up and running. Let's do some more questions. More questions. Got more here. Other ones that you have in this. Such great questions, by the way. Thank you for sending these in. If you have a question, you could submit it right there on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to answer, this is kind of a broad question, but we'll kind of talk to this one. Scott asks, do you have an idea why there is such an increase in ransomware attacks this year? Is that really true, though? Statistically, first, that's probably a difficult statistic to measure because not everybody reports ransomware attacks. But we certainly have not seen a decrease. We'll put it that way. There's been a lot of ransomware this year, but there was also a lot of ransomware last year. There was a lot of ransomware the year before last. I was talking about this. I was putting together a document and going through some things with the latest Network Plus and some of the new things with A Plus that's going to be coming up over the next year, kind of looking at ransomware specifically. And I was really looking at the trends of ransomware and the way that way the bad guys operate, the way the attackers are going after these. And there's certainly, I don't know if there has been an increase in ransomware, but one of the things that we almost always see is that the attackers are very good at spear phishing particular vertical segments. What I mean by that is you'll notice that during a 3 or 4 month run, it seems like every hospital is hit by ransomware, like hospital after hospital after hospital after hospital, because they'll find some vulnerability in a piece of software that is commonly used by that particular vertical segment. By vertical, I mean the type of business. So in the healthcare market, specifically hospital market, they have found a method, a style, an application, a vulnerability, something that's a commonality that is a vulnerability that opens up this place for an attack. And they've taken advantage of it. And they've realized we took advantage of it at that hospital. We can take advantage of it at this hospital too. Hey, look, the same thing applies for that hospital and this one as well. And so you find that suddenly we get all these reports of hospitals, and then suddenly it goes away. Whether the hospitals figure it out or whether the attackers have tapped out the market. And then suddenly for the next 3 or 4 months, state and local government is hit. More state and local government and small little entities. They all keep getting hit. That's the next few months. And then the months after that, it's small restaurants. They find these niches and they go after the niche and they figure out where the openings are and they take advantage of those. So I don't know that there's an increase in ransomware. Ransomware is a challenge. The ransomware attackers have gotten a little bit, they've gotten this down to a very slick science in how to roll these things out. What we are finding is there's battles going on both sides. It used to be that we focused our efforts on ransomware. It was so rare and so unusual that we could get ransomware insurance. And the ransomware insurance would just protect us regardless of whatever. Well, now there's so much ransomware, it doesn't work that way anymore. The insurance is much more niche. It has a lot more qualifications to it if you can get ransomware insurance at all. It's a very different perspective. And the ransomware authors have changed things because it's now not just about give us money and we'll give you a key. It's also now about give us money or we will start releasing your public information out to the internet, which changes the argument a little bit about do you give them money or not. They're asking for hush money. We're going to publish something that is information you don't want to have published. We're going to publish your source code. We're going to publish how much you're paying people. We're going to publish people's social security numbers. We're just going to put it out there unless you give us money. That's something that's happening too. There's been some of this recently. There was an interesting story. Oh, I really wish I had this story up now that you asked this. There was a state government attacked most recently, and I'll have to pull this up. This would be a good one for you to also reference, because once you get into the world of politics and you are a security professional, this becomes a little bit more involved. And we've seen this in the past with things like penetration testing, where someone was hired to go penetration test in a state government facility. They got in, they got data. It was embarrassing to the politicians, and they went after the pen testers legally. We've seen this happen. Well, this happened most recently. This is in the last couple of weeks where I want to say it was an Ohio ransomware situation, and the politicians came out and said, don't worry. They got information from us and they're threatening to release it, but everything was encrypted. They're never going to release your private information. You are safe. And a security researcher went out to the dark web, which by the way is very easy to get to. You simply load up Tor and you're in the dark web, and they found where the distribution was, where the freely available publishing, the attackers said, oh, you're not going to pay us? Here's data that we got from your organization that had people's personal information, had PII in it, personally identifiable information. And he came back and said, hey, Mr. Politician, you said everything was encrypted, but look, it's not. Here's people's private information. Here's social security numbers. Here's information that the attackers have, but you said they didn't have this. So this is obviously a problem, but you're saying one thing and another thing has actually happened. So the politicians, very even-headed, said, you're right, we're going to take care of it. No, of course they didn't do that. They instead got a restraining order against the security professional to keep them from saying anything else. So, like all good politicians, they played the political game. So instead of fixing the problem or addressing the issue, they instead went after the security folks legally to prevent them from saying anything else. So these are the situations we often run into with ransomware, because there are egos at stake, there's politics at stake, there's money at stake, and all of those things together are just an awful combination. Just a horrible, miserable, awful combination. And unfortunately, people who are very good at manipulating the legal system can often bring that down as a cudgel on people that are trying to help. And completely innocent people can be overwhelmed and with the effort and finances required to dig yourself out after being hit over the head with that legal cudgel. So that's the problem we often see, is ransomware isn't just about, we got ransomware, we got the key, we're back up and running. There's very often a lot more happening behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the scenes that make it much more of a challenge. So I don't know about the numbers though, whether we're seeing more or less. but we're certainly seeing plenty. It's not going away. We'll just put it that way. Ransomware is not going anywhere. You have to protect yourself all the time. So just having a good backup, just being able to recover from ransomware doesn't necessarily mean you can prevent your private data from being released to the world, unfortunately. Kind of how it works. Let's keep going through this list. Keep going down. I know we're at the top of the hour. We've got a few that we can kind of break through and see what else we have so many questions here. Thank you for sending all of these in. There's no way we would be able to get to all of these today, but I want to find a pretty good one. So this is speaking of this, I get this is a question I hear often, and I want to qualify it a little bit. This question's from Anonymous, who says, there's materials on the objectives that are out of date when I'm studying, and I'm being recommended to use a different protocol instead. Is this because it's still in use today? Not really sure about this question, but I think I can decipher it based on the things that are here. So first, let's talk about the objectives and talk about what is out of date. So this is an argument that people often make when we're talking about exam objectives, is that, and I hear this all the time, well, the A+, the Network Plus, Security Plus, these objectives are so out of date. This is such old information. Nobody's using these things anymore. Whenever I hear someone ask or say something like that, especially online, my response is always, that's an interesting point. What specifically in the exam objectives would you say is out of date? I think that's the first thing I often will say. And the answer, without fail, is either, well, it's in there. You should look at the objectives. There's a bunch of stuff in there. There's a lot of things. Or they'll say, well, I looked through it and I really couldn't find anything. So the real key to having an updated set of objectives every 3 years is that they're updated. We don't have discussions in our objectives about Windows XP or Windows 98 or even Windows 7. It's not in there. Windows 10 and Windows 11 are the latest version of Windows that are in the exam objectives, and those are the versions that people are running today. So this is, first, I often take umbrage with the question. I often take an argument that says the objectives are not up to date, so why am I studying this? First, I don't believe that's the case. I think all of the objectives, and I think CompTIA has done a very good job of this, of keeping their objectives up to date with what you would find in a very typical work environment. And most typical work environments would be Windows 10, Windows 11, a little bit of Mac OS, a little bit of Linux. That's a typical environment. And that's what we have on the exam, is exactly those things. There are some topics, certainly, that you might look at and go, well, that one's kind of old. That topic, yeah, but it's still being used. If you walk into a typical data center, are you going to find that technology running? Yes, you will. And if you will, you would probably need to know about that so that when you walk into that data center, you'll be familiar with that technology. So already, whenever somebody presents to me this idea that the exam objectives are outdated or other things are outdated, I always want you to bring the receipts. I always am asking, what specifically do you mean? So that we can have a discussion about it. Maybe you have found something that is sort of outdated. I would say 10 years ago, maybe versions of the exam did have some things that were sort of outdated that they should have gotten rid of, and then they did. I think it's one of the benefits of updating it every 3 years. I'm being recommended to use a different protocol instead. Is that because it's still in use today? If you're referring to network-based protocols, there's a lot of different protocols out there and a lot of different alternatives to things that would be running on a network. Without a specific example, it's difficult to make an argument there. But I think here's one that I often get from people. You will very often hear me refer to security in the web browser as being specific to SSL. Sort of a term we often use in the industry when we're talking about browser-based encryption. is that make sure you've got an updated SSL certificate. Make sure that you have your SSL encryption is end to end. And we always talk about SSL. And the argument people will make to me is we aren't using SSL anymore. We're using TLS. The transport layer security is the upgraded version of secure sockets layer, SSL. In fact, if you try to find anyone still using the older SSL protocols, it's kind of hard to find anybody who's even still using it. That's how out of date it is. Pretty much anytime you see encryption happening in a browser to a web server, it's using some version of TLS, and very often it's a pretty updated version of TLS. But myself and almost anyone else who talks about that encryption always refers to it as SSL. And so someone who is very specific, perhaps a little pedantic, perhaps a little, or perhaps someone who wants more clarification will say, stop calling it SSL. You're not using SSL. We have not used SSL for a very long time. We are using TLS, and you should call it TLS. They're not wrong. They're actually technically right, which is the best kind of right, isn't it? They are technically correct. We're not using SSL. So why do we say SSL? Because it's so easy to say. Here's what you should do. Say SSL. Kind of rolls off the tongue. Well, we're not using SSL. We're using TLS. Well, that's a little harder to say. TLS. I have the TLS protocol, SSL. TLS, SSL. See why SSL still is what we use as the term? So anytime, and I even mentioned this in the videos when I discuss these protocols in detail, is that you will always hear people call it SSL, almost always. You'll very commonly hear me refer to it as SSL, SSL encryption, SSL termination, SSL hardware, SSL in your browser. We're just calling it SSL. But every time you hear me saying that, you should be thinking TLS. Anytime you talk to a security professional or a networking professional or a web server professional, they will call it SSL, even today. So it's a really good example of how we often fight amongst ourselves in this industry with terminology, with technical righteousness, with you have to say it a certain way. I get these emails all the time because I have all these videos on the internet and people will argue when you're describing these background processes in Linux, it's a daemon. You're pronouncing it demon. Okay, well, it's spelled daemon. And in fact, one alternative pronunciation of it is daemon. But in reality, that name, daemon, was originally pronounced demon. That's how we spelled demon back in the Old English. And that's why we call it demon, because it really is that. But the two terms, we use both of them, and both of them are acceptable. So if you prefer calling it a daemon, call it a daemon. If you prefer calling it demon, call it demon. If you like SSL, call it SSL. If you like calling it TLS, call it TLS. I don't care, and I don't think you should either. I think we have bigger things to worry about, and as long as we all understand what each other is saying, we're okay. But obviously, if you're in a particular line of work where a specific TLS version and modifying that TLS version or upgrading that version of TLS to resolve a particular security vulnerability is important, then of course you should refer to it with those specifics because those specifics really matter. But when we're talking very generally, we're using very general terms or using words that are very much interchangeable. Don't worry so much about the language and how we are using it. Make sure you understand what we're talking about underneath that. It's not something specific to IT. This is in every industry, and the terminologies that are used in every industry, whether it is medicine, transportation, manufacturing, IT, similar problems. Language is always going to be an issue. So don't worry so much about that. It's always nice to clarify and you should never be offended if someone does. And if somebody sends me an email and says, you should be saying daemon and not demon, it's like, it's a fair point. I like saying demon though. So anytime you hear me say demon, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the background processes in Linux. And that's perfectly acceptable to say either, and you're welcome to say either yourself. It doesn't matter to me. It's not going to bother me at all. Either one of those works. So, and that's why we have routers and not routers. No, we do have routers, but it's also a router. So it also depends on where you are as well. There's a geographic part to this as well. So don't worry so much about those. Worry about what we're talking about, and then you'll be able to figure it out from there. Language is always a weird thing whenever you're getting into those scenarios and figuring out the details, but hopefully that will give you an idea of how TLS, SSL, daemon, we'll figure it out. Let's call the whole thing off after all. Well, that I think is a great place to kind of put a pin into this particular study group. I want to thank everyone for joining us in this second hour. And thank you for joining us in our first hour as well. We always have a good time when we go through the new questions, and I have new questions every single month. So feel free to come back next month if you're still studying for Core 2. And I've got a whole new set of questions on our next study group as well. We have a Network Plus study group scheduled for next week. I haven't even written those questions yet, which guarantees they're going to be something brand new. So feel free to come on back next week. Check our calendar, professormesser.com/calendar. If you like this video, we would love it if you could give it a thumbs up. We'd love it even more if you would subscribe to our channel. It really does help us a lot with our folks and friends over on YouTube. And it helps us let other people know that this is something that they might like as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We love doing these live streams, and we love that you're here to enjoy it with us. We hope you can join us next time on the study group, and we will see you next time on our A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.